My friends, very few moments in the past decade will be as significant as the news I bring you today. What we're seeing may be one of the most historically significant moments of the Trump era, and it's happening just before Donald Trump is facing a very tough re-election. Famous journalist, progressive Glenn Greenwald has announced he is resigning from The Intercept, a news organization he founded after they violated his contract and sought to censor his reporting on the Joe Biden-Hunter Biden scandal. They demanded that he remove certain information from an article, and when he refused, as he says he is contractually allowed to do, he's editorially independent, they even refused his secondary protection, which allows him to publish elsewhere. My friends, the news media in this country has become corrupt beyond all recognition. Glenn Greenwald founded The Intercept. Now, the significance of this cannot be understated, and perhaps many might say, Tim, Glenn certainly isn't that important. Maybe that's their opinion. I disagree. Glenn Greenwald is the man who released the NSA leaks from Edward Snowden, co-founder of The Intercept. He is a co-founder of a news organization who he says all of the editors are supporting Joe Biden and sought to censor this information. I saw the news and my heart skipped a beat. I mean, this is that significant. For a long time, I have ragged on the media. It has been one of the most serious catalysts of my entrance into hard politics. I used to just be the guy who would go on the ground and film and ask questions to better understand what people were doing and why they were doing it. But as news media in our country became more and more corrupt and biased and cynical and jaded, the more I resisted and the more angry I became. I then left one of these major news conglomerates, started out on my own, and continued to criticize many of these news organizations, seeing just how bad they've really become. For Glenn Greenwald to resign, it just shows that there are some journalists that still have integrity. And I want to show you a few of these journalists that I think do have tremendous integrity. That includes Michael Tracy, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and their stories, because what we're seeing from Glenn he's not the only journalist who has stepped away from these large institutions, but this is one of the most significant simply because Glenn is telling us outright they are censoring the story on the Biden scandal. Now, I'm sure that's not the only reason. There's probably a lot to it, and I don't want to maybe project my views or what I think onto what Glenn Greenwald is doing or why he's doing it. So let me just read for you his news story, his resignation, explaining why this is happening. And then I want to show you what's happening to news in this country. Because I have some articles from Matt Taibbi, another very great journalist, a liberal, who explains the American left has gone nuts and the news media is being destroyed because of it. My friends, I must stress, without a strong and healthy journalistic apparatus in this country, we run the risk of extreme corruption taking over. And for everything you can say about Donald Trump that you'd like to criticize, I will respect your right to do so. But doesn't it seem odd to you that we cannot get an honest conversation about the rest of the corrupt cronies in our political establishment? Why is Joe Biden being protected? Before we get started, my respect for Glenn Greenwald has just multiplied by 100-fold, and I've already been saying good things about him and run segments about his coverage in the past several weeks. But Glenn, man, inspirational, and my respect. I want to read you why he resigned. This is shocking stuff. An inside look at the bias and corruption, even at The Intercept. It breaks my heart to see this happen, but before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are many ways you can give. I got a P.O. box. You want to send me stuff, but the best thing you can do is share this video. And oh man, share this video. And I know it does help me, but please explain to people what this article is. I'm going to put the link to Glenn Greenwald's letter in the description below. Share it. Let people read this. Let them know what is happening to our news institutions. Donald Trump may be bombastic. He may say enemy of the people, and it may be over the top, but this is serious. We need our news media to challenge those who are in power, to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. That's what they're supposed to do. But so far, they have only served to protect the corrupt corporate establishment. Now, of course, they go after Donald Trump, but that is an emotional attack that they're just trying to make money off of. This is where it gets crazy. Let me read you the story, but don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and seriously, let people know what's happening. I know this might not be the biggest story. Oh, Donald Trump, signs a peace agreement or smacks down Nancy Pelosi and Pelosi strikes back. None of that stuff. No, this is actually the stuff that's shaping this nation. And I know there may be many people who might not agree with me of the historical significance of this, but I truly believe that when we look back on this era, this will be highlighted. There will be a mark here saying the day Glenn Greenwald resigned from his own news outlet over censorship of the Joe Biden scandal. This is crazy. Here's the story. My Resignation from the Intercept by Glenn Greenwald posted on Substack. The same trends of repression, censorship, and ideological homogeneity plaguing the national press generally have engulfed the media outlet I co-founded, culminating in censorship of my own articles. I am reading this 4 minutes after it's published. I'm just going to read. Glenn Greenwald writes, "Today I sent my intention to resign from The Intercept, the news outlet I co-founded in 2013 with Jeremy Scahill and Laura Poitras, as well as from its parent company, First Look Media. The final precipitating cause is that The Intercept's editors, in violation of my contractual right of editorial freedom, censored an article I wrote this week, refusing to publish it unless I remove all sections critical of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. The candidate vehemently supported by all New York-based Intercept editors involved in this effort at suppression. The censored article, based on recently revealed emails and witness testimony, raised critical questions about Biden's conduct. Not content to simply prevent publication of this article at the media outlet I co-founded, these Intercept editors also demanded that I refrain from exercising a separate contractual right to publish this article with any other publication. Glenn, smart man. He had two guarantees in his contract. The first, I am editorially independent. I will write what I see to write. Many of you may know that I have a news outlet as well called SCNR. It's doing video production. And I guaranteed that same right to those working at Scanner. They might not like my opinions. We may not agree with each other. I'm not going to tell them what they can or can't report on. Glenn Greenwald made sure he had that right as well. But his second level of protection was that if they refused to publish his stories, he could go publish wherever he wants, and they still tried to shut him down. He says, I had no objection to their disagreement with my views of what this Biden evidence shows. As a last-ditch attempt to avoid being censored, I encouraged them to air their disagreements with me by writing their own articles. That critique, my perspectives, and letting readers decide who is right, the way any confident and healthy media outlet would. But modern media outlets do not air dissent. They quash it. So censorship of my article, rather than engagement with it, was the path these Biden-supporting editors chose. The censored article will be published on this page shortly. My letter of intent to resign, which I sent this morning to First Look Media's president, Michael Bloom, is published below. He says, as of now, I will be publishing my journalism here on Substack, where numerous other journalists, including my good friend, the great intrepid reporter Matt Taibbi, seconded, have come in order to practice journalism free of the increasingly repressive climate that is engulfing national mainstream media outlets across the country. This was not an easy choice. I am voluntarily sacrificing the support of a large institution and guaranteed salary in exchange for nothing other than a belief that there are enough people who believe in the virtues of independent journalism and the need for free discourse who will be willing to support my work by subscribing. You know it, Glenn. My respect. Like anyone with young children, a family, and numerous obligations, I do this with some trepidation, but also with the conviction that there is no other choice. I could not sleep at night knowing that I allowed any institution to censor what I want to say and believe. Least of all, a media outlet I co-founded with the explicit goal of ensuring this never happens to other journalists, let alone me. Let alone because I have written an article critical of a powerful Democratic politician vehemently supported by the editors in the imminent national election. But the pathologies, illiberalism, and repressive mentality that led to the bizarre spectacle of my being censored by my own media outlets are one that are by no means unique to The Intercept. These are the viruses that have contaminated virtually every mainstream center-left political organization, academic institution, and newsroom. I began writing about politics 15 years ago with the goal of combating media propaganda and repression. And regardless of the risks involved, simply cannot accept any situation, no matter how secure or lucrative, that forces me to submit my journalism and right to free expression to its suffocating constraints and dogmatic dictates. I'd like to provide a pseudo-standing ovation to Glenn Greenwald. In 2016, I was working for a news organization that was a joint venture between ABC News and Univision, and I saw what I thought to be unethical behavior, violations of journalistic integrity and ethics. And I tried breaking my contract, and they didn't want me to. And it's called golden handcuffs. They lock you up. You can't do anything. And finally, when it came time, they gave me more money. When it came time for contract renewal, they released me. And I said, I didn't want to stay. I tried leaving a year early. I did not like what they were doing. And at great personal risk to myself, leaving a lucrative job with a massive salary, I said, I'm going to do my own thing. Now, I'm far from perfect. I've been called hyper-partisan. And I think it's fair to say that if you come to this channel, you're typically going to see me criticizing the left. I'll criticize the right, but usually I'll do a segment that doesn't focus on Trump's actions or Republicans' actions for the most part. This is why. Now, on my second channel, it may be a bit different because it's more loose, and on the IRL podcast, particularly different. And I focus as an individual on stories I think are important. Perhaps I'm not perfect, but to see news organizations that make an editorial choice to suppress information is beyond reproach. Look, I may have my partisanship and bias on my channels. My channel is listed by one listing directory as right wing, all of those things because of who I criticize predominantly. I will always try to make sure I'm showing you important information. If a poll says Trump is the best, I'll say, but keep in mind, it's one poll. If I'm going to show you a great poll for Trump, I try to focus on the aggregates. Although I have my bias as an individual, I try to make sure I'm at least being fair and reasonable and intellectually honest. I believe Glenn Greenwald, for the most part, does that as well. I've criticized him in the past, but he's been consistently good in the work he's done. Very few journalists these days are actual journalists. And the mark of a good journalist, in my opinion, is Glenn Greenwald's willingness to say he does not like Donald Trump, to write things negatively about Donald Trump, but then point out that these stories in Russiagate and all these other ridiculous accusations make literally no sense. To write fairly about Trump and then Joe Biden. He is a better man than I in that regard, with respect. To see him resign is, wow. I really do mean it. I mean, look, when I got into this game, Glenn Greenwald had already been writing for a long time. When he published the NSA leaks from Edward Snowden, he was propelled to international stardom, heralded as a progressive hero. But over the past several years, as he sought to challenge the hypocrisy in these media outlets, he's been maligned and insulted. He mentions his good friend, Matt Taibbi. I have tremendous respect for Matt Taibbi as well, and always have, going back to the days of Occupy Wall Street. It's amazing how it is not us that have changed. And now Glenn Greenwald, finally, the dam is broken. They tried shutting down him reporting a major piece of historical news media. And he said no. Look at the response people have. Here's a tweet from Matt Taibbi. He said, so over under on the number of non-conservative outlets that mention Tony Bobulinski tomorrow. I love it. Matt, good man. Matt Taibbi's not a conservative, and neither am I. Although they like to call me that. Maybe it's just because I'm one of the people who left a long time ago and was like, I'm not playing this dirty game. Matt Taibbi left. I believe he left Rolling Stone magazine earlier this year. Glenn Greenwald only leaving now. Matt Taibbi pointing out that the only people covering the fact that someone who literally worked with the Biden family is blowing the whistle and they won't report on it. Matt Taibbi says number of non-conservative outlets that mention him. Because Bobulinski gave a press conference. He said, it's true. I have evidence. Look at Brett Kavanaugh. One woman says, I don't remember. I have no witnesses. I don't even know where it was. And it's wall-to-wall coverage. This is, we have no news outlets. We have activists working for the Democratic Party. Trump has his sycophantic sites, but come on, man. Big league politics. You may have heard of that, right? Very, very pro-Trump. How much circulation do they have relative to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to any of these massive organizations, or the Intercept for that matter? You want me to get mad about these small blogs that are pro-Trump? I'm not playing that game. Look at the response. In response to this, one Twitter user said, "I don't think it matters anymore. The story is up and walking. Liberal media is an oxymoron. It is literally beyond belief what they are doing. I don't understand why none, other than Matt and Glenn Greenwald, have the courage to break ranks and call this out." And this one user responds, these aren't, I'm not trying to insult these people by saying this, but they're not, large players. These are just responses. Matt and Glenn aren't liberals or leftists. They are paid right-wing shills who pretend to be leftists. The reason no one is printing it is because it is obvious BS. You believe it is because you have brain worms. So far, a congressional committee, I believe the Senate, has verified much of the veracity of these claims. And the laptop exists. The FBI had it. This is real information. At the very least, it warrants an investigation. Maybe it's not definitive yet, but we have a witness. Shouldn't the media be a bit curious about this? They should be, but they're not. Take a look at this story. Announcement to readers, I'm moving. April 6th from Matt Taibbi. Substack is now my full-time job. Matt doesn't get into the full details about why he left, but he mentions he was not asked to leave. We also have Barry Weiss, when she wrote her resignation from the New York Times, basically saying that it's become woke insanity. The New York Times has been destroyed from the inside out and is now effectively a skin suit being worn by the woke cultists. That's my words, not Barry Weiss. I'm just giving you a hyperbolic, assessment, in my opinion. I want you to know my perspective, the things I say, the things I talk about, the things I focus on are rooted in all of this. Matt Taibbi's resignation, Barry Weiss's resignation, Glenn Greenwald's. I saw the same thing. Only my threshold, and I'm not saying this as a brag or anything or disrespectful. At the time, my threshold, look, I don't stand for BS at all. I can be self-critical. I can point out my channel is biased. I can say that I almost only ever talk about Democrats in a critical light, very rarely, and I rarely ever criticize Republicans. But I want you to understand where I come from in that the Democrats are being protected by the media. The media was the first catalyst towards me breaking out and getting into politics when I saw the corruption and the lies, how they were manipulating people. With that came the cult of intersectionality. That was what I saw being used to justify. The ends justify the means by any means necessary. And now I see the Democratic Party embracing critical race theory and their activists and allies disrupting and destroying the news media. So yes, I am biased in that direction, which is likely why I think Glenn Greenwald leaving the Intercept, a very progressive news outlet, is historically significant. It's unfortunate to say that our news media has become completely corrupted. And it's not just, look, let me show you. From June 15th, Matt Taibbi writes, American left has lost its mind. Journalism is a victim. There's recently an article from The Atlantic saying Joe Biden is the best hope if you're scared of illiberalism. They said people like Ben Shapiro, who was just adamantly opposed to Donald Trump in 2016, now supports him, saying the Democrats have lost their minds. How many times and by how many people does it need to be said that this is true? I have tremendous respect for Vosh, who came onto my IRL podcast, and he's an anti-fascist socialist, and we had a conversation. We got to a lot of its opinion. Did Trump do a good job here? Did he do a bad job here? And I can argue my opinion versus his opinion, but ultimately opinions are opinions. But when he got to talking about the things that Trump has done that's bad, I asked him if he knew what Obamagate was. He didn't. He said he'd need to brush up. I asked him if he knew about the meeting between Comey and Sally Yates and where they discussed the Logan Act and Michael Flynn. And I know this story is particularly hard to break through. And it's because our news media isn't telling you for the most part. For those that don't know the story, the quick gist of it is, it seems there was a meeting of Obama administration officials before Trump was inaugurated to try and find a way to prosecute Michael Flynn for dubious reasons, notably the Logan Act. One FBI agent asked, are we doing this to prosecute or get him fired? Why would the FBI seek to get a guy fired from his job? How weird is that? And the story gets weirder from there. An ex-FBI lawyer was recently prosecuted for altering evidence so that they can get bunk warrants against Trump to stage the Russiagate fiasco. I personally feel like when we see the media defending Joe Biden, refusing to call out his corruption, and he's corrupt, and some have written about it. To be fair, I'm not saying everyone. Like I mentioned, Politico wrote Biden Inc., how Joe Biden's family's fortunes have tracked his political career. That's the accusation. And it should be obvious. But you see, leftist activists and Democratic operatives have found their way into our news organizations, and they have destroyed them from the inside out. How sad is it that Glenn Greenwald founded the Intercept and has been forced out? Glenn, I wonder what you could have done to have prevented the takeover of your organization by zealotry. I don't know. Matt Taibbi is a liberal, and he says the American left has lost its mind. You now have liberals and conservatives alike saying this is happening. Heaven help us if Joe Biden wins. Could you imagine what that would mean for our country? If Joe Biden wins, even though we have ample evidence, now going back a year and a half or longer, of his corruption, selling his family name, using his son and his brother as intermediaries to make money. Could you imagine if this man gets elected because our news media refused to say it because they wanted him to win, because Orange Man bad? Shocking and terrifying that we may be facing a very seriously corrupt president and vice president because a media failed to do its job. Now, they say Donald Trump is corrupt and all of these things. But I'll tell you what, if the media wants to write a negative story about Trump, so long as there's evidence and it's true, please do it. And for all of the stories they've written about the things I've criticized, they say that Trump was having U.S. military personnel stay at his personal golf resorts. I think it's a conflict of interest. Shouldn't have happened. They say that Donald Trump wanted to have the G7 at Trump Doral. I say that's a conflict of interest. It should not happen. And conservatives challenge Trump on that as well. Please. It is good when they write about Trump, and it is good that they hold Trump down to a certain degree. We don't want an unchecked despot as president, and Trump is not that. Trump has his problems, but at a certain point, they have gone so over the top insane with criticizing Trump that stories now are completely fake. What will happen if this culture war continues? I ask people, what are they going to write about if Trump loses? And there's a lot. Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, naming the people who enabled Trump. This psychotic cult will grow out of control into authoritarian despotism, fascism, or communism, or whatever ism authoritarian system would take its place, would take the place of our once great nation. They'll start writing about the villains, and they already are. Joe Rogan had on Alex Jones, and they say Alex Jones lied about everything and pushed falsehoods. Joe Rogan fact-checked him in real time and found certified sources confirming much of what Alex Jones said. And I think Alex Jones says crazy things, but for the media to come out and outright lie, call for censorship, ban people, refuse to publish the news, I think this is as scary as it could probably or possibly get. I mean, we are talking about the collapse of one of the most important institutions in this country. The system that we have that protects us from the corrupt. I want to add to this. The devastation comes not just from the corrupt, but from the technology as well. With local news becoming more and more obsolete, I suppose, losing its audience and losing money, local corruption begins to form. And there are no journalists who can call them out. You know, when news media was local, advertisement covered the bills. A local restaurant would say, we're gonna pay, X amount of dollars to the local paper so that we can let people know we sell these wonderful cheeseburgers. With that money, a news organization could fund very serious investigative work that would allow people to figure out if their politicians are corrupt and keep them in check. But now advertising has gone national. It's gone to Facebook and Google, and it's gone, and news for the most part is more national. That means local officials can be corrupt. And it also means now the sickness has made its way all the way to the top. It now means that Joe Biden himself can be corrupt. And there is nothing that anyone can do to stop it. I want to give a shout out to the journalists that I think are doing a good job. As I mentioned, Glenn Greenwald, I'm speechless at the level of respect. I don't even know what to say. I mean, this is Glenn Greenwald is probably the best journalist in the world as far as I'm concerned right now, to issue the public statement and to refuse to back down. Standing ovation. There are other journalists as well. To see Barry Weiss resign, to see Matt Taibbi resign, and to see the writings of Michael Tracy give me, these are the very few journalists we have left, but also shout out to Project Veritas. Far from perfect, but doing actual journalism. The media just says, Trump's lying, there's no fraud. Trump's lying, there's no fraud. And then Veritas goes and says, there it is. Is it this national scheme? No, but there's fraud. It's insane to me. But I know what we can expect next. The smears they put on Project Veritas. They do everything in their power to make it seem like Veritas is lying, manipulative, deceptive, and all those things. My understanding is that every lawsuit they've faced, they've won because they're very careful to make sure that what they're saying is defensible. And of course, there's always framing in news, and they have their bias. In one story done by Veritas, they said, look, this pro-life organization is being censored. What they didn't notice is that a leftist anti-war organization had also been censored. Not that they did anything wrong. They just missed it, and that's their bias. So that's where someone like I can come in. When I covered the story, I said that, hey, check it out. They're also censoring this anti-war leftist organization. I think those things are important as well. There are very few good journalists left. Journalism as an institution has been crushed. But I tell you this, man, I'm at a point where I look at what Glenn Greenwald has done and it gives me hope, but it also makes me feel a bit more pessimistic. Glenn created a powerful media entity and then they took it over and they are now wearing it like a skin suit. And Glenn is gone. The founder of this publication. I mean, it's good now that we can see the great work of Glenn Greenwald, but think about the power of the institutions, the cultural institutions that are being taken over by these woke, illiberal extremists. And Joe Biden might win now. But it does give me hope. It does. More hopeful than anything. To see the journalists I have just named doing the work they do. With tremendous respect to all of them. Thank you. And Glenn, wow. I look forward to seeing the work you do in the future, and I will keep following. And I recommend everybody give him a follow as well, because I will tell you this. You can be a leftist. You might get mad when he talks about the lies about Trump. You can be on the right and get mad when he criticizes Trump. But that's the way it should be. Man, I can't believe this is the news that dropped today. But I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. I hope that this could be a point where things start to turn around, that the corrupt institutions start to falter because of their lies, and the American people start to see. And they change their mind. They start to see and they realize. I don't know if Trump is the answer. I'm sure Glenn would tell you that Trump is awful. And I think Trump is bad in a lot of ways. But we have to stop this illiberal wave, this cult of intersectionality. It must be stopped. Trump has taken action to stop it. I'll take what I can get for now. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Timcast News, I'm sorry. I'm a little still speechless. I mean, wow. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you on the next segment.